In an upscale Manhattan restaurant, a lonely millionaire is trapped in a cold, silent routine. That same night, a starving little girl wanders into the dining room and asks a question that stops everyone in their tracks. "Can I eat with you, Daddy?" This chance encounter awakens painful memories within him and the opportunity to change two lives forever. If you like this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and let us know what city you're watching from. Let's continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear. Thursday night arrived with its blanket of lights over the Upper East Side, one of Manhattan's most sophisticated neighborhoods. The wide avenues lined with leafy trees and mansions protected by high walls revealed a world where money seemed to have erased all traces of pain. Among these imposing structures, the restaurant Le Jardin stood out as a temple of gastronomy, a place where every detail was designed to convey exclusivity and refinement. Ryan Anderson parked his imported car in his reserved spot, the same one he had occupied every Thursday for nearly 3 years. At 34, he was considered one of the most brilliant entrepreneurs in the country. His fintech company had revolutionized the digital payments market, making him a millionaire before he turned 30. Trade magazines published articles about his genius. Universities invited him to give lectures. Foreign investors vied for meetings with him. But none of it filled the emptiness he had carried in his chest for as long as he could remember. He entered the restaurant as he always did, with firm steps and a distant gaze. The maitre d', ever attentive, greeted him with an exaggerated reverence. His usual table was already set, near the window overlooking the illuminated garden. Belgian linen tablecloth, Austrian crystal glasses, silver flatware. Ryan settled in and barely glanced at the menu. He ordered his usual mushroom risotto and a bottle of French wine, far too expensive to be wasted on a solitary meal. While he waited, he picked up his phone, emails, messages, notifications, nothing that required immediate attention, but he needed to keep himself busy with something, anything to stop him from thinking, from feeling, from remembering that this loneliness wasn't just a choice, but a prison he had built himself over the years. Brick by brick, hurt by hurt, he had erected walls so high he could no longer even see the sky. The risotto arrived steaming, artistically arranged on the plate. Ryan tasted it without interest. It was excellent, of course. Everything there was excellent. But the flavor didn't reach him. Nothing did. He ate mechanically between glances at his phone and the garden outside, where a decorative fountain spouted crystal-clear water in a mesmerizing motion. For a few minutes he allowed himself to watch that continuous, purposeless movement, water that rises only to fall, just like his life, success that led nowhere. On the other side of the ornate wall that separated the restaurant from the sidewalk, a completely different reality was unfolding. Madison, or simply Maddie, as her mother used to call her, watched the restaurant's activity with large, hungry eyes. She was only 7, but life on the streets of New York City had already taught her lessons many adults would never learn. She knew, for example, that rich restaurants threw away food that could still feed a child for days. She knew the back alleys of these places were watched, but that there was always a moment of distraction. She knew she had to be fast, quiet, invisible. 3 months earlier, her life had been completely different. She lived in a small town in West Virginia where the air was clean and people knew each other by name. Her mother, Joanna, worked as a seamstress and baked cakes for parties on the weekends. They didn't have much, but they had enough. They had love, they had laughter, they had Sunday mornings with warm bread and coffee with milk. Maddie remembered the smell of that bread. It was the smell of her mother's embrace, of safety, of a world where she was still just a child. But then the illness came. Fast, cruel, devastating. In a few short weeks, Joanna was gone. Maddie never really understood what happened. The adults spoke in complicated words, lowered their voices when she approached, and made that pitying face she quickly learned to hate. When it was all over, they looked for Maddie's father. He had left when she was just 2, saying he wasn't ready to be a dad, that he had other plans, that a child would get in the way of his dreams. But now, with no other options, they tried to find him. He showed up only once, tall, with a scruffy beard and tired eyes. He looked at Maddie as if she were a piece of old furniture someone was trying to push on him. She tried to get closer, but he took a step back. He said he couldn't handle it, that she was too much work, that he had another family now. And he left, leaving behind a little girl who could barely process that she had just been rejected for the second time in her life, this time by someone who was supposed to protect her unconditionally. The remaining relatives didn't want her either. An aunt claimed she already had too many kids. An uncle said he was unemployed. A distant cousin simply hung up the phone. Maddie was passed from hand to hand until someone suggested taking her to New York City, where there might be more opportunities. But the opportunities never came. She was left in an overcrowded shelter from which she ran away in the first week. She preferred the streets to the coldness of those grey walls, where children cried at night and no one came to comfort them. Since then, she had been surviving. She slept under awnings when it rained, in parks when the weather allowed. Some street vendors took pity on her and gave her bruised fruit or day-old bread. A woman who sold flowers near the subway sometimes brought her a hot meal in a takeout container. But hunger was a constant companion, a hole in her stomach that never fully closed. On that particular Thursday, the hunger was unbearable. Maddie hadn't eaten anything substantial in 2 days. Her small body trembled, not just from the cold, but from weakness. She watched the restaurant and made a decision. She had to try. She had to eat. She knew it was risky, but desperation spoke louder than fear. Taking advantage of a moment when the staff was busy in the main dining room, Maddie slipped around to the back. The kitchen door was ajar, probably to air out the hot environment of the ovens. She entered silently, moving like a ghost between the stainless steel counters. She saw a basket of fresh, still warm French bread. Her stomach rumbled far too loudly. She reached out a trembling hand, but before she could touch the bread, a gruff voice echoed behind her. The restaurant manager, Morris, was known for his rigidity. A former military man, he maintained discipline in the establishment with an iron fist. Seeing the dirty, barefoot girl in his impeccable kitchen, he felt a mixture of anger and disgust. He grabbed Maddie's thin arm with excessive force and began dragging her toward the back exit, grumbling about hygiene, security, and inappropriateness. Maddie tried to pull away, but she was too weak. Her wobbly legs could barely support her. The manager opened the door to the dining room, intending to cross it quickly so as not to disturb the patrons, but the girl, in a desperate impulse, managed to break free. And then, without thinking, without planning, moved only by a survival instinct she didn't even understand, she ran into the main dining room. The effect was immediate. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Silverware hung suspended in the air. Heads turned. A dirty, barefoot child in torn clothes and tangled hair running through the dining room of one of New York's most expensive restaurants. It was a sight that didn't belong in that setting. It was brutal reality invading the protected world of the Manhattan elite. Maddie looked around, lost, scared. She saw faces of shock, of disgust, of morbid curiosity, and then her eyes met Ryan's. There was something about that man she couldn't explain. Maybe it was the fact that he was alone, like her. Maybe it was the expression on his face, which wasn't revulsion, but something different, something that almost looked like recognition. Without quite understanding what she was doing, Maddie walked to his table. The manager tried to intercept her, but she was faster. She stopped in front of the man in the impeccable suit, and from her dry throat came a sentence she hadn't planned, a sentence that sprang from some deep place in her wounded soul, a sentence that completely silenced the restaurant. "Can I eat with you, Daddy?" Ryan felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. Those words, those eyes, that desperation barely disguised as hope. It was like looking into a mirror of the past, a mirror that reflected a version of himself he had spent decades trying to forget. The manager reached the table red with anger and embarrassment and began to apologize profusely to Ryan, but Ryan raised his hand, silencing him. His heart was pounding. Something inside him was cracking, like a dam about to give way after years of pressure. He looked at the girl, really looked at her. He saw the dirt that was only superficial. He saw the hunger that was deep. He saw the fear that was ancient. And he saw something else. He saw dignity. This child wasn't begging for a handout. She was asking for company. She was asking to be seen, to be human. Ryan was not a man of impulse. Every decision in his life had been carefully calculated. But in that moment, something in him either broke or was mended. He couldn't tell which. He turned to the manager with a voice that brooked no argument and said to prepare a hot plate for the girl immediately. A full meal. And to seat her at his table. She was his special guest for the evening. The shock on the manager's face was almost comical. Some patrons at nearby tables made noises of disapproval. One woman asked to be moved, but Ryan didn't care. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about appearances, about business, about consequences. He was just feeling, and what he felt was an inexplicable connection to this child. Maddie was led to a chair beside him. She was so scared she could barely move. She didn't understand what was happening. She expected to be thrown out, maybe even taken by the police. But there she was, sitting in a padded chair, at a table covered with a white cloth. A waiter appeared, clearly uncomfortable, but professional enough to maintain his composure. Ryan asked him to bring vegetable soup to start, then a plate of grilled chicken with rice and vegetables, something nutritious but not too heavy for a stomach that had been empty for days. While they waited, Ryan didn't know what to say. He wasn't good with children. He wasn't good with people, really. But he looked at her and asked her name. "Madison," she replied softly. "But everyone calls me Maddie." "Maddie," he repeated. "My name is Ryan." She nodded, still afraid this was some kind of trick, that at any moment he would laugh at her and send her away, but then the soup arrived, steaming and fragrant, and Maddie forgot all her fears. She picked up the spoon with trembling hands and began to eat, slowly at first, like someone afraid the food might disappear. Then, with more confidence, as she realized this was real, Ryan watched a lump forming in his throat. He knew that hunger. Not the physical hunger, which he had never experienced in the same way, but the emotional hunger, the hunger to belong, to be seen, to matter to someone. Between spoonfuls, Maddie began to talk. Maybe it was the warmth of the food or the unexpected kindness of this stranger, but the words started to flow. She told him about her small town, about her mother who made warm bread, about the day everything changed, about the relatives who didn't want her, about the father who said she was too much work. Ryan listened in silence, feeling each word like a blade. It was his story, with different details, with different names, but it was his story. He had been rejected too. He had been through foster care too. He had also learned far too young that the world was a cold place and the only person he could rely on was himself. The main course arrived. The restaurant's chef, Beatrice, a 50-year-old woman with kind eyes, had insisted on preparing it herself. She came to the table, knelt beside Maddie, and said she had made the dish with all her love, that she hoped she would like it. Maddie thanked her with tears in her eyes and began to eat. With every bite she seemed to come back to life. Color returned to her face. The light returned to her eyes. And then, in the middle of the meal, she stopped and said something that made Ryan swallow hard. "My mom used to make a dish like this," she said. "On Sundays, she'd wake up early and make everything with so much love. She said that food made with love feeds not just the body, but the soul." "And where is your mom now?" Ryan asked, though he already knew the answer. Maddie looked down. "She went to heaven," she said simply. "People said she went to a better place, but I wish she had stayed here with me." Ryan felt something break inside him, a barrier he had maintained for years without thinking. He reached out and lightly touched Maddie's small hand. She looked up at him, surprised, and then, for the first time since she had entered the restaurant, she smiled. A small, shy, but genuine smile. Around them, the restaurant had returned to normal. Conversations resumed. The buzz returned. But some gazes lingered. An elegantly dressed, grey-haired woman watched the scene with a thoughtful expression. At the end of her meal, she approached Ryan's table. "Forgive the intrusion," she said in a polite voice, "but I must say you did something remarkable today. My husband and I have been dining here for years and have never seen anything like it. You could have sent the girl away, as would have been expected, but you chose to see her as a human being, as someone who deserves dignity." Ryan was speechless. He didn't know if he was being praised or criticized, but the woman continued. "My father always said that a person's true character is revealed by how they treat those who can offer them nothing in return. You showed character today, and that is rare. Very rare." She walked away before Ryan could respond. He stared at his own hand, still on the table near Maddie's. When was the last time he had touched another person outside of a formal business handshake? Maddie had finished eating and was now struggling to keep her eyes open. The warmth of the restaurant, the food in her stomach, the momentary relief from fear, it all conspired to pull her towards sleep. Her head drooped to the side, her eyes blinking heavily. Ryan looked at her and made another impulsive decision. He called the waiter and asked for the check. Then carefully he touched Maddie's shoulder. "Come on," he said, "you need to get some real sleep. In a real bed." Maddie looked at him with a mixture of hope and fear. "Where are we going?" she asked. "To my house," Ryan replied. "Just for tonight. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." He didn't know what the rest meant. He didn't have a plan. He had no experience with children. He didn't know how to handle this situation. But he knew he couldn't let her go back to the streets. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. Ryan took his coat and placed it over Maddie's thin shoulders. It was far too big, dragging on the floor, but at least it kept her warm. They left the restaurant under curious, critical, and some even admiring gazes. Outside, the New York night continued its frantic pace, indifferent to the small miracle that had just occurred inside Le Jardin. In the car, Maddie sat in the passenger seat and looked around in awe. She had never been in such a nice car, so clean, so new-smelling. Ryan turned on the heater, noticing she was still shivering slightly. He drove in silence through the illuminated streets, while Maddie watched the city through the window. "It's all so beautiful," she murmured. "The lights, the buildings, it looks like another world." It is another world, Ryan thought, but didn't say. A world she shouldn't have been forced to know so soon. A world that had rejected her before even giving her a chance. Ryan's mansion was in a gated community on the Upper East Side. Automatic gates, 24-hour security, perfectly manicured gardens. When the car stopped in the garage, Maddie got out slowly, still wrapped in the oversized coat. She looked at the house and her eyes widened. "You live here?" she asked, incredulous. "Alone?" "Alone," Ryan confirmed, feeling the weight of that word as never before. Inside the house, he called for the housekeeper, Mrs. Peterson, who was still finishing her cleaning for the day. The 60-year-old woman, who had worked for Ryan for 5 years, nearly dropped her broom when she saw her boss walk in with a child. "Mrs. Peterson," Ryan said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "This is Maddie. She'll be staying here tonight. Could you prepare the guest room, with clean clothes if you have any, a warm bath, everything she needs?" Mrs. Peterson was a practical and kind-hearted woman. She didn't ask questions. She just nodded and extended a hand to Maddie, who followed her up the stairs. Ryan stood in the foyer looking around the huge, empty house he called home. For the first time, he noticed how quiet it was, how cold, how devoid of life. He went up to his office and poured himself a glass of whiskey. His hands were trembling slightly. What was he doing? He knew nothing about taking care of a child. He knew nothing about being a father, a guardian, anything other than a lonely entrepreneur. But then he remembered Maddie's eyes, the way she had eaten that soup, the word that had come out of her mouth, Daddy. She didn't know him, she knew nothing about him, but in that moment of desperation, she had seen something in him that made her use that word, and that word, for some reason he couldn't explain, had struck something deep inside him, something he thought had been dead for a long time. Ryan slept poorly that night. He stared at the ceiling, thinking about Maddie in the next room, thinking about his own childhood, thinking about the boy he had been alone in an overcrowded foster home, waiting for someone who never came, thinking about how he had built an empire but lost himself in the process. When he finally fell asleep, it was already dawn, and for the first time in years, his dreams weren't about spreadsheets, investments, or market strategies. They were about warm bread, small hands, and the word Daddy echoing in a silent restaurant. The sun rose over New York City, bringing with it another day. But for Ryan Anderson and Madison, this wouldn't be just another day. It would be the first day of something new, something scary, something they had both, each in their own way, been needing for a very long time. It would be the first day of a story neither of them had planned, but that both, without knowing it, were destined to live. Ryan woke to the sound of voices coming from the kitchen. For a moment, disoriented, he thought he had left the television on, but then he remembered. Maddie. The girl was in his house. He looked at the clock and saw it was past 8 in the morning. He had an important meeting at 10 with international investors. A meeting that could mean the expansion of his company into 3 new countries. A meeting he had planned for months, but his thoughts couldn't focus on the investors. All he could think about was the child sleeping in the guest room. He got up quickly, put on a robe, and went downstairs. The voices were coming from the kitchen. Mrs. Peterson was talking softly to someone. When he walked in, he saw Maddie sitting at the table, wearing one of his t-shirts like a dress, her feet dangling in the air, not reaching the floor. "Good morning," he said, feeling strangely shy in his own home. Maddie turned her head and smiled. "Good morning, Mrs. Peterson made hot chocolate. She said it's her grandmother's recipe." Ryan looked at the housekeeper, who gave him an approving smile. The woman was a mother of 3 grown children and had that practical wisdom that comes from years of raising kids. She had found some old clothes from when her grandchildren visited and had improvised something for Maddie to wear while her own clothes were being washed. "Mr. Anderson," Mrs. Peterson said, maintaining the respectful tone she always used. "The little one woke up early, took a nice long bath. I think she missed hot water. I gave her what I had here, but you'll need to buy her proper clothes, and there are other things a child needs." Ryan nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. He looked at Maddie, who was drinking her chocolate carefully, blowing on it before each sip. Her hair was still damp from the bath, combed back. Without the street grime, he could see her face clearly. She was pretty, with delicate features and expressive eyes. But there was something in those eyes that troubled him, a maturity that shouldn't be there, a sadness that no 7-year-old should carry. "Maddie," he began, sitting down at the table, "I need to talk to you about a few things, about what's going to happen now." She stopped drinking and looked at him attentively. Her body tensed, as if preparing to hear something bad. "You need a place to stay," Ryan continued, choosing his words carefully. "And I'd like you to stay here, at least for now, until we can figure everything out properly." "Figure what out?" Maddie asked, her voice laced with caution. "There are places," he explained, "places that take care of children who don't have families. Or we could try to find a relative of yours who—" "No," Maddie interrupted, her voice getting louder. "Nobody wants me. They already tried. Everyone said no. And those places—" she paused, trembling. "Those places are bad. The kids cry at night and no one comes to check on them. The bigger kids hit the smaller ones. The food is bad. It's cold. It's—" she searched for the word. "Empty." Ryan felt a tightness in his chest. He knew that emptiness. He had lived in it for years. "Then you'll stay here," he said, surprising himself, with the firmness of his decision. "For as long as you need, but we'll have to sort some things out. Paperwork, school, legal stuff, do you understand?" Maddie nodded, though she clearly didn't understand much. But the important thing was that she could stay, that she wouldn't be sent away. At least not yet. Ryan glanced at the clock. The meeting. He picked up his phone and dialed his assistant, Megan, an efficient 40-year-old woman who had managed his schedule for 5 years. "Megan, I need to reschedule the 10 o'clock meeting." On the other end, a surprised silence. In 5 years, Ryan had never rescheduled a meeting. Never. "Reschedule," she repeated, as if certain she had misheard. "The meeting with the European fund investors? The one you said was the most important of the quarter?" "Yes, that one. I need to handle something urgent. See if you can get it for tomorrow or the day after." "Mr. Anderson," she said, her voice filled with concern. "They flew in from London specifically for this. If we reschedule now—" "Megan," he interrupted her, but gently, "I trust you to handle this. Tell them I had an unavoidable commitment, a personal one." Another silence. Personal. Ryan never had personal commitments, Work was everything. "Is everything all right, sir?" she asked. "Did something happen?" "Everything's fine," he replied, looking at Maddie, who was watching the conversation intently. "Actually, everything's different, but it's fine." He hung up before Megan could ask any more questions. Mrs. Peterson was looking at him with an expression he couldn't decipher. Approval? Surprise? Maybe both. "I need to make a few calls," Ryan said. "But first, let's go out. You need clothes, Maddie, and other things. What do you think about going to the mall?" Maddie's eyes lit up. "I've never been to a mall," she confessed. "Only seen them on TV." Ryan felt that tightness in his chest again. How many simple things had this child never experienced? How many normal childhood experiences had been denied her? "Then today will be the first time," he said, forcing a smile he hadn't used in years. An hour later, they were at the nearest mall. Ryan had asked Mrs. Peterson to accompany them, feeling he needed a woman's guidance for buying a little girl's things. Maddie held his hand tightly, looking at everything around her with enchantment. The store windows, the lights, the bustling people. It was all new and fascinating. They went into a children's clothing store. The saleswoman, a young woman in her 20s, greeted them with a professional smile that faltered slightly when she noticed the disparity between the well-dressed man and the child in clearly improvised clothes. "I need a complete wardrobe for her," Ryan said directly. "Everyday clothes, school clothes for when she starts, shoes, whatever else is necessary. And don't show me anything too expensive or too cheap. I want good quality but appropriate for a child." The saleswoman regained her composure and began showing. "Are there options?" Maddie touched each item with reverence, as if afraid they would disappear. Ryan watched her reactions, trying to understand what she liked. He noticed her eyes lit up more with vibrant colors, that she preferred animal designs to flowers, that she liked pockets on her pants. "You can take anything you like," he said. "Anything?" Maddie repeated, incredulous. "Can I take 2? "You can take 10 of each if you want," Ryan replied, and immediately realized his mistake when he saw Maddie's eyes widen. Mrs. Peterson intervened gently. "How about we get 5 or 6 of each type? That's more than enough to start. Children grow fast, so there's no point in overdoing it." Ryan nodded, grateful for the guidance. He knew nothing about raising children. He had never thought about having children. He had never allowed himself to think about it. And now here he was, buying clothes for a girl he had known for barely 24 hours. After the clothing store, they went to a shoe store. Maddie tried on sneakers for the first time in her life and laughed when Ryan tied the laces. "They're so bouncy," she said, jumping lightly to test them. They bought 3 pairs, one for every day, one more formal, and one for playing. In a stationery store, Ryan bought notebooks, colored pencils, pens, a backpack with a butterfly print that Maddie had chosen, and children's books. In a pharmacy, personal hygiene items that Maddie had never had. Gentle shampoo, strawberry-scented soap, a pink toothbrush, a decorated hairbrush. In every store, Maddie touched the products as if they were treasures. She whispered, "Thank you," after every purchase. And Ryan felt his heart, so long hardened, begin to soften. They stopped for lunch in the food court. Maddie wanted pizza, so Ryan ordered a large one, though she only ate 2 slices. He realized her stomach still wasn't used to large amounts of food. While they were eating, a little girl Maddie's age ran past, chased by a slightly older boy. They were both laughing loudly, playing. Their mother, sitting at a nearby table, smiled as she watched them. Maddie looked at the scene with an expression Ryan couldn't decipher. Sadness, longing, envy. "Did you have friends?" he asked gently. "Before?" Maddie nodded. "I had a best friend, Clara. We used to play with dolls. We made forts with blankets." She cried. "When I left, she said she'd miss me." Ryan didn't know what to say. How do you comfort someone who has lost everything? How do you promise things will be okay when you're not sure of anything yourself? "You'll make new friends," he said finally. "At school, when you start." Maddie looked at him with hope. "I get to go to school?" "Of course you do," Ryan replied. "Every kid has to go to school. It's the law." "But what if they don't accept me?" Maddie said softly. "What if they find out I lived on the street? What if they laugh at me?" Ryan leaned forward, looking directly into her eyes. "If anyone laughs at you, you tell me and I'll handle it. No one is going to hurt you. Not while I can stop it." Maddie smiled, a small but genuine smile. "You're nice. Different from other adults." "Different how?" Ryan asked, curious. "You listened to me," she said simply. "The others just talked. They decided things for me. But you ask. You want to know what I think." Ryan swallowed hard. He wasn't used to compliments. Not this kind of compliment, at least. He was used to being called a genius, a visionary, a leader. But nice? Someone who listened? That was new. Back home, their arms laden with bags, Maddie fell asleep in the back seat of the car. Ryan watched her in the rearview mirror. She looked so small, so fragile, and at the same time so strong, stronger than he had ever been. At home, Mrs. Peterson helped organize the purchases while Maddie slept on the living room sofa. Ryan went to his office and made the call he had been putting off. He called Beatrice, the chef from the restaurant. She had left. Her personal card the night before, saying to call if he needed any help. Beatrice answered on the second ring. "Ryan, it's good to hear from you. How's the little one?" "She's fine," he replied. "She's sleeping now. We spent the morning buying things she needed. But Beatrice, I don't know what I'm doing. I have no idea how to take care of a child. And there are legal issues. She can't just stay here without anything official." Beatrice took a deep breath. "I know someone who can help, a social worker. She's serious, competent, and above all, she has a heart. She's been working with foster care cases for years. Can I give you her contact information?" "Please," Ryan said, feeling a relief he hadn't expected. "I need help. I don't want to do anything wrong. I don't want Maddie to get hurt any more than she already has been." "You're already doing so much right," Beatrice said gently. "The simple fact that you're worried about it shows you have a heart. Many men in your position would have just thrown money at the problem, but you're getting involved, you're caring." Ryan hung up with the social worker's contact. Information written down. He stared out his office window, looking at the perfectly manicured garden of his mansion. How many times had he been in that office, making deals, making decisions that moved millions? And how many times had he felt something real, something that mattered beyond the numbers? He heard a noise and turned. Maddie was at the door, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "You were here," she said. "I woke up and didn't see you. I got scared." "Scared of what?" Ryan asked. "That it was a dream," she replied. "That I'd wake up and be back on the street." Ryan felt a pain in his chest. He got off the sofa and knelt in front of her, bringing himself to her eye level. "It wasn't a dream. You're here. You're safe. And you're going to stay safe." "For how long?" Maddie asked, and there was so much fear in that question that Ryan could barely answer. "For as long as you need," he said finally. "I'm not going to send you away, Maddie. I'm not going to reject you like the others did. You have my word." She hugged him then, throwing her small arms around his neck. And Ryan, who hadn't hugged anyone in years, who avoided physical contact as if it were a weakness, hugged her back. He held that fragile little body against his and allowed the tears he had been holding back to finally fall. They stayed like that for a long moment. A broken man and a lost girl, finding in each other something they didn't know they were looking for. Comfort, understanding, a connection that transcended logical explanation. When they separated, both of their eyes were red. Maddie wiped her face with the back of her hand and smiled shyly. "You cry," she said, as if making a discovery. "I thought adults didn't cry." "Some of us do," Ryan said. "We just learn to hide it well." "My mum used to say that crying cleanses the soul," Maddie shared. "She said it's like the rain. It washes away the bad things so new things can grow." "Your mother was wise," Ryan said. "She was," Maddie agreed, and the longing in her voice was palpable. That evening, Ryan hired the social worker Beatrice had recommended. Dr. Helen Miller came to the house and spoke at length with him and with Maddie. She was a woman in her early 50s with graying hair and kind eyes that had seen much suffering, but had not lost their capacity to care. She explained the legal process to Ryan. Maddie was technically in an irregular situation. There were protocols to follow, documents to file, agencies to notify. But there were also ways to do things right. Ryan could begin the process of becoming a foster parent, which could eventually lead to permanent custody or even adoption. Adoption, Ryan repeated, as if testing the weight of the word. It's a possibility, Dr. Miller said. But it's a long process. There are evaluations, interviews, adjustment periods. It's not something you decide overnight. For now, the important thing is to ensure Maddie is safe, well cared for, and that her rights are protected. Ryan nodded. He was willing to do whatever it took. He didn't know exactly why, he couldn't explain it rationally, but he knew he couldn't let Maddie go. Something in her had touched something in him, something he thought had been dead for a long time. After Dr. Miller left, Ryan went to Maddie's room. She was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. He knocked lightly on the door. "Can I come in?" She nodded. He came in and sat on the edge of the bed, keeping a respectful distance. "Dr. Miller seems nice," Maddie said. "She didn't treat me like I was a charity case. She just asked what I felt, what I wanted." "And what do you want?" Ryan asked. Maddie was silent for a moment. "I want to stay here. With you. I know it's weird. I barely know you. But it's like—" She searched for the words. "Like you get me. Like you know why I'm so scared. So scared of being sent away again." "I know," Ryan said softly, "because I have that fear too. Even now, as a successful adult, I'm still afraid people will find out I'm not good enough, that I don't deserve to be where I am." "But you're rich," Maddie said, confused. "Everyone respects you. I saw it at the restaurant. They treated you like you were important." "Being respected for your money is easy," Ryan explained. "Being loved for who you are, that's hard. And I never learned how to do that. I never let anyone get close enough." "Why not?" Maddie asked. "Because I'm scared," he admitted. "Scared of being rejected again. Like I was when I was a kid, like you were." Maddie reached out her small hand and touched his. "I won't reject you. You were nice to me. You gave me food. You brought me to your house. You bought me clothes. No one's ever done that for me, only my mom." Ryan squeezed her hand gently. "And you gave me something I thought I had lost a long time ago. You gave me a reason to care about someone other than myself." They sat like that, holding hands in the dark, two wounded human beings finding some comfort in each other. It wasn't a magic solution. It didn't erase the past. It didn't heal all the wounds. But it was a start. A hesitant first step toward something neither of them could name, but both desperately needed. Healing, family, love. Ryan stayed there until Maddie fell asleep. Then he left quietly and went to his room. He lay in bed but couldn't sleep. His mind was racing, processing everything that had happened in the last 2 days. 48 hours ago he was just a lonely entrepreneur, and now there was a child sleeping in the room next door. A child who had somehow entered his perfectly controlled life and turned everything upside down. And the strangest part was, he didn't mind. For the first time in years, he felt like he was doing something that truly mattered. Something that had nothing to do with profits, expansion, or professional recognition. Something purely human. Something real. He picked up his phone and opened his messages. There were dozens of them. From Megan, worried about the rescheduled meeting. From partners questioning his recent decisions. From investors wanting to confirm commitments. He looked at all those messages, all those demands on his time and attention, and felt an indifference that surprised him. For years, that had been everything. His work was his identity. His business was his reason for being. But now, compared to the responsibility of caring for Maddie, it all seemed curiously trivial. Not unimportant, but no longer the only thing that mattered. He replied only to Megan, saying they would talk the next day. He left the rest for later. For now, he had more important things to think about, like how to enroll a child in school, how to explain to his team that his life had changed drastically, how to learn to be something he had never been and never thought he would be, how to learn to be a father. The word still sounded strange in his mind. Father. Maddie had called him that in the restaurant, in a moment of desperation. But could it become true? Could he, so broken inside, so unprepared, be what this little girl needed? He had no answers. But he had something he hadn't had in a long time. He had hope. Fragile, hesitant, but real. Hope that maybe, just maybe, he could fix something in Maddie that had been broken, and that in the process, Maddie could fix something in him that he thought was beyond repair. Was it a foolish hope? Probably. Was it realistic to expect that two strangers with such traumatic pasts could build something healthy together? Maybe not. But for the first time in his adult life, Ryan was willing to try, willing to risk, willing to feel, and that, somehow, was revolutionary. He finally fell asleep as the sky began to lighten, and he dreamed of warm bread, a child's laughter, and a house that finally felt like a home. The first 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind. Ryan dove headfirst into the process of regularizing Maddie's situation. Meetings with Dr. Miller, visits to Child Protective Services, endless paperwork, psychological evaluations. Every document signed, every form filled out, was another step toward something he still couldn't fully name, but felt growing inside him each day. Maddie was different. Her body was starting to gain weight in a healthy way. The dark circles that had marked her face were disappearing. She smiled more. But there were still nights when she woke up scared, crying out for her. Mother and Ryan would rush to her room, sit by her bed and hold her hand until she fell back asleep. In those moments, he wondered if that pain would ever fully heal, or if she would just learn to live with it, as he himself had. The news about Maddie had spread quickly. Megan, his assistant, was the first to know officially. Ryan had called her in for a meeting and explained, directly but emotionally, what was happening. She had listened in silence, her eyes growing wider and wider. "Mr. Anderson," she had said when he finished, "in 5 years of working with you, I've never seen you like this. So," she searched for the word, "human." He didn't know if that was a compliment or a criticism, but he accepted it either way, because it was true. For the first time in a long time, he felt human, vulnerable, imperfect, but alive. The team at his company reacted in different ways. Some found it admirable, others concerning. There were rumors that Ryan was having a nervous breakdown, that the pressure had finally taken its toll, but he ignored the gossip and focused on what mattered. One morning, 3 weeks after their meeting at the restaurant, Ryan was in his home office when he heard laughter coming from the garden. He got up and looked out the window. Maddie was outside with Mrs. Peterson, chasing a butterfly. Her laughter was crystal clear, pure, free. And something inside him broke in a good way, as if a wall he had been building for decades had finally crumbled. The phone rang. It was Beatrice, the chef from the restaurant. "Ryan, I need to tell you something. Someone has been asking about you and the girl, a man, he said he's her." "Father?" Ryan felt his blood run cold. The father, the one who had rejected her, the one who said she was too much work. "What did he want?" Ryan asked, his voice colder than he intended. "I'm not sure. I didn't speak to him directly. One of the waiters told me. But I thought you should know if he's looking s—" "Thanks for letting me know," Ryan interrupted. "I'll be on the lookout." He hung up and stared at Maddie through the window. The happiness on her face, the lightness in her movements. He couldn't let that man hurt her again. He wouldn't allow it. But the question was, did he have the right to stop him? Legally, biologically, that man was Maddie's father. And Ryan, what was he? A well-intentioned stranger? A rich entrepreneur with a savior complex? Or something more? He called Dr. Miller and told her about the phone call. She listened attentively and promised to look into it. If the biological father reappeared demanding custody, they would have to deal with it legally. But given the circumstances, given that he had abandoned the child, there was a chance Ryan could maintain the temporary custody that was being processed. Chances, possibilities, nothing guaranteed. Ryan hated uncertainty. His entire professional life was built on control, planning, eliminating variables. But here he was, in a situation where he controlled nothing, where everything depended on laws, on others, on fate. That night, after dinner, Ryan and Maddie were in the living room. She was drawing in a new notebook, her tongue sticking out slightly in concentration. He pretended to read a book. but he was really just watching her. "Ryan," Maddie said suddenly, without looking up from her drawing, "can I ask you a question?" "Of course." "Why did you help me that night at the restaurant? You could have sent me away. Everyone expected you to, but you didn't. Why?" Ryan closed the book. It was a question he knew would come eventually, a question for which he still didn't have a complete answer. "When I saw you," he began, choosing his words carefully, "I saw something familiar. Something that reminded me of myself when I was a kid. I was rejected too. I was also in places where I wasn't wanted. And I think," he took a deep breath, "I think I saw in you a chance to do something that no one did for me, to be for you what I needed someone to be for me." Maddie stopped drawing and looked at him. "You were like me? You lived on the street?" "Not on the street," Ryan said, "but in bad places, orphanages, foster homes, places where you're just a number, where no one calls you by your name, where you learn you can't trust anyone." "What happened to your parents?" she asked. "I never knew them," Ryan replied, and felt the old, familiar pain. "I was left at a hospital when I was a baby. That's it. No note, no explanation. And I was in the system until I turned 18. I was in a lot of foster homes, but it never worked out. Either they gave up on me, or I gave up on them. I learned early not to have expectations. But you turned out okay," Maddie said. "You got rich, famous." "I got rich," he agreed. "But I don't know if I turned out okay. I built a company, made money, achieved success, but it was empty. Every Thursday I went to that restaurant, alone, trying to fill a hole that money can't fill. And then you showed up. And somehow," he smiled sadly, "you showed me what was missing." "What was missing?" Maddie asked. "Connection," Ryan said. "Feeling like I matter to someone, not for my money or what I can do, but for who I am, and also being able to matter to someone in the same way. Taking care of you, Maddie, makes me feel," he searched for the word, "complete, like I finally have a purpose that isn't just making more money or closing more deals." Maddie got up and went to him. She climbed onto the sofa and snuggled up beside him. "I feel complete here too. It's not like it was with my mom. Nothing will ever be like it was with her. But it's good in a different way, like I've finally stopped falling." Ryan put his arm around her. "I won't let you fall, I promise." "But what if my dad comes back?" she asked, her voice growing small. "What if he wants me back?" Ryan's heart tightened. He didn't know what to answer. He couldn't make promises he might not be able to keep. "We'll deal with that if it happens," he said. "But one thing I know, no one is going to take you against your will. Your opinion matters. What you want matters. And I will fight for you, with every ounce of strength I have." Maddie closed her eyes, relaxing against him. "I love you," she murmured sleepily. "I know it's weird to say that, but it's true." Ryan felt tears sting his eyes. "I love you too," he replied, and realized it was the first time he had said those words to someone and truly meant them. "I love you too, kiddo." She fell asleep there, nestled against him, and Ryan sat motionless, afraid to wake her. He looked up at the ceiling and allowed himself to feel gratitude. Gratitude for that night at the restaurant. Gratitude for having made the right decision. Gratitude for getting a second chance to do something meaningful with his life. But the peace was short-lived. 2 days later, Maddie's father showed up. Ryan was at his corporate office when Megan entered, pale. "There's a man here. He says he's Maddie's father. He's demanding to speak with you." Ryan felt anger rise like bile. He had the man shown to a conference room. He took a few minutes to compose himself, to breathe deeply, to remember that violence wouldn't solve anything. Then he went to meet him. The man was younger than Ryan had imagined, maybe 30, thin, with simple but clean clothes, restless eyes that couldn't maintain contact. When Ryan entered, he stood up quickly. "Mr. Anderson," he began. "My name is Charles, Charlie Edwards. I'm Madison's father." "I know who you are," Ryan said, his voice sharp. "The question is, what do you want?" Charlie swallowed hard. I want my daughter back. I made a mistake. He paused. When she passed, I wasn't right. I was scared. No money, no support. But things are different now. I got a steady job, rented an apartment. I'm ready to be a father. Ryan studied him. He saw sincerity there, but he also saw weakness. He saw a man who had abandoned his daughter when she needed him most, and was now coming back because his conscience was bothering him, or because he'd heard Ryan was rich. You rejected her, Ryan said, his voice controlled but harsh. You said she was too much work. You left her alone. She slept on the street, Charlie. On the street, at 7 years old. Do you have any idea what that does to a child? Charlie looked down. I know, and I'll carry that guilt forever. But I'm her father. I have rights. Rights? Ryan repeated, almost laughing with bitterness. You think you have rights? Rights come with responsibilities. You abandoned her. You forfeited any rights when you did that. The law doesn't work that way, Charlie said, finding some courage. I'm the biological father. I can prove it. And unless my parental rights have been legally terminated, I have a right to custody. Ryan felt his anger boil. He wanted to hit the man. He wanted to throw him out of his company, out of his life, out of Maddie's life. But he knew he couldn't. He knew this had to be resolved the right way. I'll speak with my lawyers, Ryan said, and we'll handle this legally, but I'll tell you one thing. I'm not handing Maddie over to you without a fight. She's happy now. She's safe. She's healing. I won't let you destroy that. Charlie stood up. I don't want a fight. I just want my daughter. Then you should have thought of that before you abandoned her, Ryan retorted. After Charlie left, Ryan immediately called Dr. Miller and his lawyers. He explained the situation. The lawyers were direct. Charlie was right. Unless there was a legal process that terminated his parental rights, he technically had a right to custody, but given the circumstances, there were grounds to challenge it. The abandonment, the previous inadequate conditions, Maddie's current well-being. It would be a battle, but a winnable one. The problem was time. Legal processes were slow, and in the meantime, Charlie could keep demanding to see his daughter. Ryan went home. Early that day, he found Maddie in the garden, painting with watercolors under Mrs. Peterson's supervision. When she saw him, she ran to him with a wide smile. Look what I made! A house with a garden! It's our house! He looked at the painting. It was full of the vibrant, typical colors of a child's drawing, but the love put into it was evident. Our house. Those words hit him. It's beautiful, he said, hugging her. That night, after dinner, Ryan asked Mrs. Peterson to leave them alone. He sat with Maddie in the living room and held her, small hands in his. I need to tell you something, he began. Immediately, fear returned to her eyes. Are you sending me away? No, he said quickly. Never. But your father, he came to see me. He said he wants you back. Maddie turned pale. No, I don't want to go. He left me. He said I was too much work. I don't want to go back to him. I know, Ryan said, squeezing her hands. And I'm going to do everything I can to make sure you don't have to. But he is your father, legally. And there might be a fight. You might have to go to court, talk to a lot of people. It's going to be hard, but I'll be with you every step of the way, I promise. Maddie started to cry. It's not fair. I finally found a place where I'm happy, where someone wants me. And now he comes back, now that I don't need him anymore. Life isn't fair, Ryan said gently. I learned that early, but I also learned that we have to fight for what matters. And you matter to me, Maddie. More than any business, any money, anything. I will fight for you. With all my strength. She threw herself into his arms, sobbing, and Ryan held her, feeling his own anger and helplessness. How could the world be so cruel? How could it allow a child to be rejected, and then, when she finally found some peace, have to face this storm again? In the following days, the situation intensified. Charlie started making visits to the house, demanding to see Maddie. Ryan allowed it, under supervision, because his lawyers said he couldn't completely refuse. The visits were tense. Maddie barely spoke to her father. She answered, in monosyllables. She avoided eye contact. Charlie tried. He brought cheap gifts. He told stories about how he had changed. But Maddie wasn't buying it. She saw through him. She saw a man moved by guilt, not love. She saw someone who wanted her back, not because he loved her, but because he couldn't stand being the villain of his own story. One afternoon, after a particularly difficult visit, Maddie went up to Ryan's room. He was reading documents for the legal case being built. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Always," he replied, putting the papers aside. "If the judge makes me go with him, will you forget about me?" Ryan felt as if he'd been slapped. He got off the bed and knelt in front of her. "Listen to me very carefully, even if the worst happens, even if you have to go. I will never, ever forget you. You changed my life, Maddie. You showed me what really matters. And that no one can take away. Not a judge, not your father, not the whole world. But I'll be with him, far away from you. Then I'll fight for visitation rights. I'll be there whenever I can. I'll send you messages, gifts. I'll do everything I'm allowed to. You're not getting rid of me that easily." Maddie smiled through her tears. "Promise?" "I promise. With all my heart." She hugged him tightly. "You're the best dad I could have, even if you're not my real one." "I am real," Ryan said firmly. "Being a father isn't about biology. It's about being there. It's about loving unconditionally. And I love you, Maddie. I'm your father in every way that matters." That night, Ryan couldn't sleep. He paced the house, thinking through all the possible scenarios. How he would fight. How he would use every resource he had. Money, connections, lawyers. He would do whatever it took. But he also thought about Maddie, about what was best for her. What if, by some miracle, Charlie really had changed? What if he could give her something Ryan couldn't? A biological connection to her parents, the memory of her mother through her father. But then he remembered the fear in Maddie's eyes, the way she flinched when Charlie tried to touch her, the trust she placed in him, Ryan, and he knew he couldn't give up, not without fighting to the very end. The preliminary hearing was set for 2 weeks later. It would be the first legal step. The judge would hear both sides and make a temporary decision on custody while the full case proceeded. Ryan hired the best lawyers he could find. He prepared extensive documentation on the care he had been providing Maddie. Medical reports showing her improved health, psychological reports indicating her emotional stability, testimonies from Mrs. Peterson, from Beatrice, from Dr. Miller. On the other side, Charlie was also preparing. He had a lawyer provided by legal aid. He presented proof of his new job, of his rented apartment, of his supposed transformation. The night before the hearing, Ryan sat with Maddie in the garden. The sky was clear, full of stars. They sat in silence for a while, just watching. "My mom used to say that the people we love become stars when they go," Maddie said softly, "that they stay up there in the sky watching over us." "That's a beautiful thought," Ryan said. "Do you think it's true?" "I think love doesn't die," he replied. "I think when we truly love someone, that person stays with us forever, in our hearts, in our memories, in the way we change because of them." "Then you'll be with me forever," she said, "because I love you, and that love isn't going away, no matter what happens tomorrow." Ryan pulled her into a hug. "I'll be with you forever, one way or another. I promise you that." They stayed there until Maddie fell asleep in his arms. Then Ryan carried her inside, to her room, tucked her in, and sat by her bed, watching her sleep. Her peaceful face, finally free of the marks of the street. Her clean, shiny hair, her small hands, relaxed on the blanket. He had built an empire, amassed a fortune, earned the respect of thousands, but none of it compared to the privilege of watching this child sleep in peace, knowing he had played some part in it. If he lost tomorrow, if the judge decided against him, at least he would have this. He would have given Maddie a few weeks of safety, of love, of normalcy. He would have shown her that not everyone would abandon her, that she was worthy of being loved, and that no one could take from her, but he didn't want, just that. He wanted years. He wanted to watch her grow up. He wanted to be there for her first day of school, for her birthday parties, for the challenges of adolescence, for everything. He wanted to be the father he never had. He wanted to give her the family they both had always longed for. And tomorrow, in front of that judge, he would fight for it with everything he had. Not with anger, not with arrogance, but with love. With pure, true, unconditional love. Because in the end, that was all that mattered, love, the only thing truly worth fighting for. The morning of the hearing arrived with a grey sky that seemed to reflect Ryan's anxiety. He woke up early, after a restless night, and found Maddie already awake, sitting up in bed, clutching the teddy bear he had bought her the week before. "I couldn't sleep well," she confessed when he came in. "I was afraid I'd have nightmares." He sat beside her and hugged her. "I didn't sleep well either. But you know what helped me? Remembering that no matter what happens today, the love we have for each other is real. And nobody can take that away from us." Maddie nodded, but her eyes were filled with fear. "What will I have to do there? Are they going to ask me questions?" "Probably," Ryan said honestly. "The judge will want to know how you're feeling, what you want. But Dr. Miller will be there. I'll be there. And you just have to tell the truth. Speak what's in your heart." "What if the truth isn't enough?" Ryan felt a lump in his throat. "Then we'll find another way. But it won't come to that. I believe that." Mrs. Peterson prepared a hearty breakfast, but neither of them could eat much. Ryan put on his best suit, the navy blue one he always wore for important meetings. Maddie wore a new dress they had picked out together, light blue with white details. They looked like a family getting ready for an important event, but the tension in the air was palpable. The courthouse was downtown, an imposing old building that housed the family court. When they arrived, the lobby was crowded. Entire families, lawyers, social workers, all with their own stories, their own battles. Mr. Davis, Ryan's lead attorney, was waiting for them at the entrance. He was a man in his 50s with greying hair and a serious but compassionate demeanor. Beside him stood Dr. Miller and two associate attorneys who would assist with the case. "How are you feeling?" Mr. Davis asked. "Nervous," Ryan admitted, "but ready." They entered the courtroom. It was smaller than Ryan had imagined. A long bench for the judge at the front, smaller tables for the lawyers on either side, chairs for the parties involved. Charlie was already there, accompanied by his lawyer. When he saw Maddie, he tried to smile, but she averted her gaze and pressed closer to Ryan. The judge entered a few minutes later. Judge Robert Andrews, according to Mr. Davis, was known for being strict but fair, always putting the child's best interest first. He was a man of about 60, with thick-rimmed glasses and a stern expression that didn't invite levity. "We are here," he began after everyone was seated, "to determine the temporary custody of the minor, Madison, age 7. The petitioner, Charles Edwards, biological father, requests full custody. The respondent, Ryan Anderson, currently with de facto custody of the minor, contests. We will hear from Mr. Edwards first." Charlie stood up, clearly nervous. "Your Honor, I made mistakes, I know that. When Maddie's mother passed away, I wasn't prepared. I was unemployed, had no support, I was scared. I rejected my daughter at the worst moment of her life, and that will haunt me forever. But I've changed. I got a steady job as a mechanic. I rented a 2-bedroom apartment. One of the rooms would be all hers. I'm in therapy to deal with my issues. I want to be the father I should have been from the start." The judge listened impassively. "And what do you have to say about the period when your daughter was homeless?" Charlie looked down. "It's the worst thing I've ever done, letting her get to that point. But I didn't know. I thought her relatives would take care of her. When I found out she was on the streets, I was desperate. I tried to find her, but I couldn't, until I heard she was with Mr. Anderson." Mr. Davis stood up. "Your Honor, may I question?" "You may." "Mr. Edwards, at what point exactly did you learn your daughter was on the streets?" Charlie hesitated. "About 2 weeks after she disappeared, from the shelter." "And what did you do to find her?" "I looked, I walked the streets, I asked people." "Did you file a police report?" "No." "Did you contact social services?" "Not directly, but I—" "Did you hire anyone to help with the search?" "I didn't have the money." "But you have money now to rent a 2-bedroom apartment and retain counsel." Charlie turned red. "I got the job after. Things got better." "Convenient," Mr. Davis said, with a touch of sarcasm. Your Honor, what we have here is a father who abandoned his daughter at her most critical. A moment, made no significant effort to find her when she was at risk, and now returns when he discovers she is being cared for by someone of means. I question his true motivations. Charlie stood up abruptly. It's not about the money. It's about my daughter. Order, the judge said firmly. Mr. Edwards, please be seated. We will conduct this hearing in a civilized manner. Mr. Davis sat back down, satisfied with the reaction he had provoked. The judge then turned to Ryan. Mr. Anderson, you have no prior relationship with the minor. You are not a relative, not a legally appointed guardian. Can you explain the circumstances under which you took over her care? Ryan stood, feeling all eyes on him. Your Honor, I met Madison in a restaurant where I used to dine. She was desperate, hungry, scared. I could have ignored her like everyone else there did, but something in her eyes touched me. I saw something in her that I recognized, because I was also a rejected child. I also went through orphanages and foster homes, and I swore to myself that if I ever had the chance to make a difference in a child's life, I would. And you believe you have made a difference? Ryan looked at Maddie, who was watching him with tears in her eyes. I believe we've made a difference for each other. She showed me that financial success means nothing without human connection. And I hope, have shown her that it's possible to be loved, to be valued, to have security. In just a few weeks, I've seen this child transform. I've seen the light return to her eyes. I've seen her smile, play, be a child again. And I don't want to see that taken from her. The judge made a few notes. I will now ask the minor to approach. Maddie turned pale. Ryan squeezed her hand encouragingly. It's going to be okay, he whispered. She stood up slowly and walked to the front. The judge came down from his bench and knelt to be at her level. His serious expression softened slightly. Madison, he said gently, do you know why you're here? She nodded. Because of custody. Who's going to take care of me? Exactly. And I need to know how you feel. What you want. Because you are the most important person in this room. This is all about what's best for you. Do you understand? I understand, she said in a small voice. Your father is here. He says he wants you back. How do you feel about that? Maddie looked at Charlie. He tried to smile at her, but his eyes betrayed his nervousness. She then looked at Ryan, who gave her an encouraging nod. I'm scared, she said finally. He left me when I needed him most. He said I was too much work, and now he wants to come back. But I don't want to go. I want to stay with Ryan. Why do you want to stay with Mr. Anderson? Maddie took a deep breath, and when she spoke, her voice was firmer. Because he sees me, not as a problem or as work. He sees me as a person. He listens to me. When I have nightmares, he stays with me until I fall asleep. When I cry because I miss my mom, he hugs me and lets me cry. He doesn't try to make me forget what I've been through. He understands, and he loves me for real. Not because he has to, because he wants to. The judge looked at Ryan, then at Charlie, then back at Maddie. And if I decide that you should stay with your father, how would you feel? Tears began to stream down Maddie's face. Sad, scared, lost. I know he's my dad by blood, but Ryan is my dad by heart, and the heart is what matters most. The silence in the room was absolute. Even Charlie's lawyer seemed moved. The judge stood up and returned to his bench. You may return to your seat, Madison. Maddie ran back and threw herself into Ryan's arms. He held her tightly, feeling her, small hands clutching his suit. The judge spent a few minutes reviewing papers, making notes. The tension was unbearable. Finally, he spoke. This is a difficult situation. On one hand, we have the biological father, who made grave errors but claims repentance and change. On the other, we have a man with no prior relationship, but who has clearly developed a deep, affectionate bond with the minor. The law favors the biological family, but the law also prioritizes the best interest of the child. He paused. Ryan could barely breathe. Mr. Edwards, you abandoned your daughter at her most vulnerable moment. You allowed her to become homeless. And when you finally return, it is after discovering she is being well cared for by someone of means. While I acknowledge that people can change, the pattern of behavior demonstrated concerns me deeply." Charlie opened his mouth to protest, but the judge held up a hand. "At the same time, Mr. Anderson, you have no prior experience with children. You have not gone through the normal processes for adoption eligibility. You made an impulsive decision that, while admirable, did not follow proper legal protocols." Ryan felt his heart sink. He was going to lose. He was going to lose Maddie. "However," the judge continued, "there is something that outweighs all these technical arguments. The testimony of Madison. I heard the fear in her voice when speaking of her father. I saw the love in her eyes when speaking of Mr. Anderson. And as a family court judge, my duty is not to blindly follow the letter of the law, but to do what is best for the child. And it is clear to me that what is best for Madison at this moment is to remain where she is." Ryan felt tears. "Full." Maddie gripped his hand tightly. "Therefore, I grant temporary custody to Ryan Anderson for a period of 6 months. During this period, the formal evaluation process for permanent custody and eventual adoption will be initiated. Mr. Edwards, you will have the right to supervised visits every 2 weeks, where you may demonstrate your change and rebuild a bond with your daughter, if she so desires. At the end of 6 months, we will re-evaluate the situation." He banged the gavel. "Court is adjourned." Ryan couldn't move. He couldn't process it. Had he won? Could he keep Maddie? Mr. Davis turned to him with a broad smile. "Congratulations. That was the best defense we never had to make. Maddie won the case for us herself." Charlie stood up abruptly and left the room, clearly shaken. His lawyer followed, trying to console him. Ryan felt bad for him, but not enough to regret the outcome. Maddie was crying, but they were tears of relief. "I can stay? I can really stay." "You can," Ryan said, his own voice choked with emotion. "For 6 months, guaranteed, and then, if all goes well, forever." She hugged him so tightly she nearly knocked him off his chair. And Ryan hugged her back, not caring about the tears soaking his expensive suit, not caring about the people watching, not caring about anything but that moment. That perfect, imperfect moment. Outside the courthouse, the sun had broken through the clouds. Mr. Davis explained the next steps: home evaluations, regular reports, psychological support for Maddie. Ryan listened intently, asking questions, already mentally preparing for each stage. When they were finally alone in the car, Ryan and Maddie looked at each other. "Want to go home?" he asked. "Our home," she corrected. "I want to go to our home," and he smiled, a genuine smile he hadn't used in years. Our home. Yes, that was it, not just his house, theirs. On the way, they stopped at an ice cream parlor. Maddie ordered strawberry with chocolate fudge. Ryan got vanilla. They sat on a nearby park bench and ate in comfortable silence, just watching people pass by. "Ryan," Maddie said after a while, "can I ask you something?" "Always." "When you saw me that night in the restaurant, what did you really see? Was it really you as a kid, or was it something else?" Ryan thought, carefully before answering. "I think I saw both. I saw myself, yes. But I also saw an opportunity, a second chance. The chance to do something right. To be for someone what no one was for me. And," he hesitated, "I also saw a possibility I had never considered before. The possibility of being a father, of having a family, of having someone who loved me not for what I have, but for who I am." "And what are you?" Maddie asked. Ryan smiled. "I'm still figuring that out. But with you by my side, I think I'm going to like what I find." They finished their ice cream and got back in the car. For the rest of the drive, Maddie talked excitedly about what she wanted to do when they got home. Maybe paint another picture, or play in the garden, or just watch a movie together. Ryan listened, marveling at the transformation. This was no longer the scared little girl he had seen in the restaurant weeks ago. This was a child who was learning to be a child again, who was rediscovering joy, curiosity, hope. When they got home, Mrs. Peterson was waiting anxiously. "As soon," As she saw their faces, she knew the result and rushed to hug them. "I made a special lunch to celebrate," she said. "I had faith things would work out." Lunch was a celebration. Beatrice, the chef, also showed up, bringing a cake she had made especially for the occasion. Megan, Ryan's assistant, sent flowers and a heartfelt message. Even Mr. Davis called to congratulate them again. That night, after Maddie had gone to sleep, Ryan stood in his office, looking out the window. He thought about how his life had changed in just 1 month, how everything he thought was important had been revealed as empty, how a 7-year-old girl had done more for him than all the therapists he had tried over the years. He had built an empire, but he had been alone at the top. Now he had something infinitely more valuable. He had someone who loved him, someone who needed him, someone who made him want to be better. He heard light footsteps and turned. Maddie was at the door, holding her teddy bear. "I had a nightmare," she said softly. "Come here," he said, opening his arms. She ran to him and snuggled into his lap. He rocked her gently, humming a tune he didn't know where it came from. Maybe something he'd heard somewhere in the distant past. Maybe something his heart created in that moment. "Ryan," Maddie murmured sleepily. "Thank you for not giving up on me." "Thank you for not giving up on me," he replied. She fell asleep there in his lap, in the office that had once been the headquarters of his loneliness and was now just another room in a house that finally felt alive. Ryan sat there for hours, not moving, just holding this precious child that fate had placed in his path. He thought about the future, the next 6 months of evaluation, the adoption process that would come after, the challenges they would face. Maddie would have to go to school, make friends, deal with the inevitable questions about her family. He would have to learn to balance work and fatherhood. He would have to learn to be present in a way he never had been before. But for the first time in his life, these challenges didn't scare him. Because he wasn't alone anymore. He had Maddie and she had him, and together they could face anything. The following months were an emotional roller coaster. Maddie started school and, as Ryan had predicted, faced difficult questions, but she surprised everyone, including him, with her resilience. When asked about her family, she would simply say she lived with her adoptive dad. And when someone tried to pick on her for it, she would lift her chin and say that family isn't about blood, it's about love. Ryan started attending parent-teacher conferences. At first he felt out of place, the only single father in a room full of couples, but he soon discovered that many other families were also non-traditional. Divorced parents, grandparents raising grandchildren, uncles taking in nephews, and all with the same goal, to do what was best for their children. Charlie's visits continued, and something surprising happened. Over time, away from the pressure of being the sole responsible party, away from the guilt that consumed him, Charlie began to connect with Maddie in a healthier way. Not as a father demanding obedience, but as an adult who was genuinely interested in her. Maddie, in turn, began to relax in his presence. She still didn't call him Dad. Maybe she never would. But she called him Charlie, and they talked. And slowly they built something new. Ryan realized he didn't have to compete with Charlie. Maddie had room in her heart for both of them, each occupying a different place. Charlie would always be the biological father, the link to her mother. But Ryan was the one who was there every day, the one who packed her school lunch, the one who helped with her homework, the one who dried her tears and celebrated her victories. 6 months after the first hearing, they returned to the courthouse, this time for the final evaluation. The reports were unanimously positive. Maddie was thriving in school. Her physical and mental health had improved dramatically. The bond with Ryan was deep and genuine, and she herself, when asked again by the judge, was clear. She wanted to stay with Ryan. She wanted to be adopted by him. The judge, the same Judge Andrews, smiled for the first time. He rarely saw cases with such positive endings. He granted permanent custody immediately and approved the start of the formal adoption process. On the night the adoption papers were finalized, Ryan organized a special dinner. He invited Mrs. Peterson, Beatrice, Megan, Mr. Davis, Dr. Miller, and surprisingly Charlie, because in the end they had all been part of this journey. When everyone was gathered, Ryan stood up with a glass in his hand. "I'd like to make a A year ago, I was a rich but empty man. I had everything and nothing at the same time. And then, on an ordinary Thursday, a small, brave girl walked into my life and changed everything. She showed me that success isn't measured in money, but in love. That family isn't about blood ties, but about choice, about being there, about loving unconditionally. He looked at Maddie, who was beaming in her new dress. Maddie, you saved me as much as I saved you, and I am grateful every single day for that night at the restaurant, for you being brave enough to ask for help, for me being smart enough to offer it. So this toast is to you, my daughter, my family, my heart. Everyone toasted, many with tears in their eyes. Maddie got up and ran to Ryan, hugging him tightly. I love you, Daddy. And Ryan, who for so long had built walls around his heart, who had sworn never to allow himself to be vulnerable, who believed that love was a weakness, felt those walls finally crumble completely. And in their place, something new blossomed, something strong, resilient, and infinitely more valuable than any fortune. Love, family, purpose. It had taken more than 3 decades, a traumatic childhood, years of self-imposed loneliness, and the unlikely encounter with a little girl in a restaurant. But finally, Ryan Anderson had found what he had always been searching for, not in business or money or recognition, but in something much simpler and much more profound, in a child who called him Daddy, in a house that was finally a home, in a heart that had finally allowed itself to love. And when everyone had gone home and the house was quiet, Ryan went into Maddie's room to say goodnight. She was lying down, almost asleep, but opened her eyes when he came in. Daddy, she said, do you think my mum would be happy if she knew I was here, with you? Ryan sat on the edge of the bed and took her hand. I'm sure she's happy. Wherever she is, she knows you're safe, loved and cared for. And that's all a mother wants for her daughter. Maddie smiled. Sometimes I dream about her, and she says she's proud of me, that everything is okay. She's right. Everything is okay. Better than okay. It's perfect. Maddie closed her eyes. Good night, Daddy, I love you. Good night, my little girl, I love you too. Ryan left the room and stood in the hallway for a moment. He thought about everything that had happened, about all the choices that had led him to this moment, about all the pain, loss, rejection, and he realized it all had a purpose. It had all prepared him to be ready when Maddie appeared in his life, because sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as random moments, a lonely dinner, a desperate child, a simple question, can I eat with you? And sometimes saying yes to that question changes everything, not just for the child who needs saving, but for the adult who didn't know he needed to be saved too. Ryan went back to his room, and for the first time in years, he slept deeply, without nightmares, without insomnia, without the loneliness that had plagued him for so long. Because he wasn't alone anymore. He had a daughter, he had a family, he had a purpose that went beyond himself. And in the room next door, Maddie slept peacefully, dreaming of flower gardens, warm bread, and a house full of love. A house where she finally belonged. A house where she was seen, heard, and loved. A house that was truly a home.